Lenin a block Gemara. Today's daf is daf Ayin Zion. We're actually up to Ayin Zion and Beis. I'll just bring you up to speed, remind you what we're up to. We're discussing, according to Rav Shimon said, that kachim that you take responsibility for. Then if you steal it, you have to pay dalad v'hei. And we talked about that. The original guy set aside as a carbon, and so on and so forth. So the question is, according to Rav Shimon, he holds in another place that we had before that if you shecht a stolen animal that was turned out to be treif, you're not liable 4 or 5 times because it's a shchita she'eino ruya. It's not a suitable shchita. So if you stole someone's carbon and you shechted it, even though so you're saying it's because the person, the nignav, the victim, took a chrayis for this carbon, so it's considered his. So when you shechted it, you stole the victim's carbon, but it's a shechita she'eino ruya because you shechted it in your house, in your backyard. It's ineffective, and according to Reb Shimon, for another reason, you don't pay 4 or 5 times because it's shchita she'eino ruya. Why are you responsible? So we gave 3 answers. Two, the answer was that you actually did it in the Beis Hamikdash. So you when you shechted it, it was a shchita ruya. So then the question is, if it's a shchita ruya, you brought it in the Beis Hamikdash, then harei chazara kettle lebayim, as if you returned it. If you brought it in the Beis Hamikdash and you had the guy in mind, so he fulfilled his mitzvahs as if you returned it. So why are you paying anything? So we answered, one is he did do in the Beis Hamikdash and you shechted, it was proper, but then the blood spilled out, and without the blood, it's ineffective, so the guy has to bring another carbon. So on one hand, it's a shchita ruya, on the other hand, you did not reimburse him. Another answer was that you shechted in the Beis Hamikdash, but you did not have in mind l'shem bailim. You didn't have that person in mind. So the carbon is a valid carbon; it can be eaten, but you're not yoytze your obligation. So it's a shchita ruya, but you didn't return it to the owner because he has to bring another carbon. And the shlakish, that was Rabbi Yochanan, and the shlakish answer is you did it outside of the Beis Hamikdash. You actually shechted it, and it was a Baal Mum. And because it was a Baal Mum outside of the Beis Hamikdash, so therefore, because even though you didn't redeem it yet, because it could be redeemed, even though you already shechted already, since there was a moment after you shechted it that you could have redeemed it, so then we say that we're talking about it was a Baal Mum from the beginning, so therefore you can redeem it, and therefore after you shechted it, you can redeem it. It's as if it was already redeemed, and therefore it's a shchita ruya. It's no longer considered a carbon. It's a shchita ruya. But obviously, the original guy then didn't fulfill his obligation of bringing a carbon, so therefore you owe him the 4 or 5 times. That's what we said. And then we had a discussion that l'chayda you didn't redeem it at all. So or the case of the blood at the time when you shechted it, there was no blood yet poured on the mizbeach, or you didn't sprinkle the blood yet. So at that juncture, it's a shchita she'eino ruya because you need the sprinkling of the blood. So we said, "Kol oimid lizrik kizar." I mean, since the plan was to sprinkle the blood as if it already happened, and here also, since you could be paid it, it's as if already you were redeeming it, and therefore it's no longer considered a carbon. That's what we said. So now we are talking. So then we said, where do you find this concept that because you could have done something, it's as if it was done already? So we brought the case of a zrika, where you proved that if depends when it was lina before, if you had enough time during the day, you had enough time during the day to sprinkle the blood, that even though you didn't, then we say it's as if as if it's really a carbon, and therefore there was a lina. In other words, you left it overnight and you didn't sprinkle the blood till tomorrow. This animal now generates tumah, this carbon. But if you did it a minute before shkia, so there's no time whatsoever to sprinkle the blood, so it's never really a full carbon. So then it does not generate tumah, even though it becomes possible as nicer. Then we said, but where do you find padiyah? Because you could have redeemed something as if you redeemed it already. So we said, yes, we do. The same Rab Shimon. When we're talking about Rab Shimon, Rab Shimon says that a para aduma, the animal itself is metame tumas oichlin. Why is a para aduma tumas oichlin? Because the para aduma l'chayr it's also bahano. Why is it metame tumas? You can't have any benefit from it. So why is it metame tumas oichlin? So he said that according to Rab Shimon, you could redeem it. What do you mean you could redeem it? Because Rav Shimon holds that even though once you shechted an animal, you can no longer redeem it. Because when it comes to redeeming an animal, it says in the pasuk, you have to stand up the animal, you have to assess the value of the animal, and then you redeem it. You give the money to the Beis Hamikdash. But if the animal is dead, how can you stand it up and be marich it? However, Rav Shimon says that paraduma, even after you shechted it, you can redeem it if you found a nicer paraduma. Then we'll say, what do? We want the nicer one. Go ahead and redeem this one, and we'll use a nicer one. So there's a potential for it to be redeemed before you burnt it. So therefore, because there was a potential to redeem, even though he didn't redeem it. We see that's what we learned yesterday. And okay, yeah.
If the guy Reuben put aside a carbon, Shimon steals it and shechts it.
Yeah.
Is he over on the Ila? He's mile behektish or not?
Yeah, of course.
If it belongs to, Reuben dedicated it. It's still in his house. He didn't take it to the mikdash yet.
So we're saying that your carbon, if you're chay bachray, is as if it's still Reuben's. If it's not, what do you call it? By Reuben, if it did not take a chrayis, then it belongs to Hegdish. Then you have all the normal dinner of using Hegdish. But we're not talking about focusing on relation. Yeah. Okay. Teisha has an interesting discussion whether a carbon chatas is considered a carbon kachem mizbech, or whether atzer it belongs. It's called bedek habayis. In order to maintain the ongoings of the base of mikdash, the kohenim have to be pure. In order for the kohenim to be pure, you need a paraduma. So this is part maintenance. And Tesis wants to say that perhaps a paraduma is actually called, it's sometimes referred to as a carbon chatas, that it belongs to the mizbeach. But then Tesis says anything. He says he couldn't find any opinion anywhere in the Gemara that says that a paraduma has a status of a carbon. It actually belongs to the bedek habayis. It's part of the maintenance because and the raya you shecht it outside the base of mikdash. Where do you find a carbon that you slaughter outside the base of mikdash? Yeah, but not on mizbech. Okay, so now then we're up to the Gemara. The Gemara wants to know why Rabbi Yechon doesn't agree with the Shlokish, why the Shlokish doesn't agree with Rabbi Yechon. So we explain why Rabbi Yechon doesn't like the Shlokish, because why talk about an animal of Balmum? We're talking about a carbon here, so talk about an animal without any blemishes. But why does the Shlokish learn that we're talking about a Balmum? So this is what we introduced yesterday, the idea, according to the Shlokish, if an animal, if you cannot shech if there's for whatever reason you cannot check, then you wouldn't be responsible for selling it either. So let's here we up to this. Up to the Gemara, we'll go over the last piece we did. About 6 lines at the top. Amalach, the Shlokish will tell you. Why doesn't he learn Rabbi Yechon? We're talking about a normal case of a balmum, but you shechted it, not a balmum, a tamim, an animal unblemished, and you shechted it without having in mind the owner. So therefore it's a proper shechita, but you didn't reimburse the owner. Why doesn't he learn this way as well? One answer is, you know what? Ella the shlok is my time. Amalach will tell you. He says, you know why? It says interesting. The one constantly says umechare when the pasuk says oimechare. So it's tvachai oimechare. You shechted it or you sold it, and the Torah seems to equate the two. In what way? Kol heicha the isim mechira. Wherever there's a possibility of selling it, then isim betvicha. You can also be over for shechting it. The kol heicha the less of mechira, but wherever there's no iser of the mechira. You can't sell it. For example, something that belongs to Hegdish. You can't sell Hegdish's stuff. It belongs to Hegdish. How can you sell it? Is less a bit ficha. And Hegdish belongs to the Eibush. The Eibush is everywhere. You never take it out of the Eibish's rishus. Is less a bit ficha. Nor will you be liable if you go ahead and shech. So v'hani kachim. If we're talking about a kachim which is a tamim unblemished, if it's unblemished, it belongs to the base of Hegdish. Right? It's proper Hegdish. The original guy made it Hegdish. How can the guy turn around and sell it? It would never lead Eibush Rishus. And since the Ganim can't sell it, there's no way you can ever have a case of Shchita. So there's Shlokish Rabbi Yechon, I don't agree with you. Can't be talking about, you said talking about an unblemished animal that the original guy made it a carbon, and then the Ganim stole it, and when he shechted it in the base of Mikdash, there's a proper Shchita, and it can be eaten, except the original guy is not Yaitse. He said it can't be that case, because then how can it be a case of Tzvicha then? Because if we're talking about either if you sold it or if you shechted it can't be Shchita. But you wouldn't be liable. If you would have sold it as kachim, it wouldn't be a proper sale. Is less than nor can there be a case of shechting. And Imar says, this is actually a fundamental argument between the Shlokish and Rabbi Yechanan. Do you have to have both options, or one option is enough to be liable? Then we learned if you sell an animal that's a treif. The divir, according to Rav Shimon says if an animal is a treif and you shecht it, you're not liable 4 or 5 times. Why not? Because he says you need a shchita. Shchita means ruya. It has to be an effective shchita, not a shchita she'einu ruya. So what about an animal that's treif? So if you would have shechted, you wouldn't be liable. But instead, what you did was you sold it. Are you liable for selling it? Is Rabbi Yechon because the Torah gives you 2 options: selling or shechting. Okay, you can't shecht, but you sold. And the Shlokish is potter. He says, why? I've got less than you cannot check it, but you sold it. If you can't do one, you can't do the other. Rabbi Yechon asks the Shlokish a question. It says the following: what happens if gonav klaim? You stole an animal which is born from like a hybrid. You stole an animal that was crossbred. That the mother was, let's say, a sheep, and the father was a goat. Okay, a sheep and a goat can mate together, and that's where this sheep came out of. And then the tvacha, you shachted it. Are you liable or not? 4 or 5 times. The Torah says shoir iseh. This is a seh, but it came from a mixed marriage. What happens then? Crossbreed. Or treifa, or a treifa umachra, and you sold it. In other words, treifa again, you sold it. Now, if the Bryce is being pedantic and has only treifa, which means that you cannot shecht it because it's shechita sheinaruyas of Shimon, and yet selling your chayiv, that's already a question of Rish Lakish. You said Rish Lakish that you don't have both options, you're not liable. Here it says clearly, you treifa. And if the author of this Bryce is Shimon, that means you cannot shecht it because it's shechita sheinaruyas. Yet it says if you sold it, you chayiv. We'll get to the minute. And you pay Bava Kama Daf. My lab Rab Shimoni, isn't this a case of Rab Shimon? Why? Because why else would the Braisa say by treifa only if you sold it? Why doesn't the Braisa say it's both examples? Either you shechted or you sold it. Why did the Braisa say you only sold it? Because obviously shechting you wouldn't be liable. Why wouldn't you be liable? Because it's treif. So what? Because it's not a good shechita. Who says that if it's not a good shechita, you're not liable? Only Rab Shimon. So it's clear that the author of this Braisa is Rab Shimon.
Wouldn't it be also because Shimon would say that if it's a treifa, it's going to die anyway, and therefore
no one said that. But right now you killed it. But the point you can live even if you hold treifa in a chaya, even if you hold treifa in a chaya, but that's 12 months. Right now the fact that it says that you killed it. That in a way that it already happened in a positive way. But here the point is that Shimon holds chita she'ein yeruya lo yishmei chita. It has to be row, and since it's treif, it's not a chitaruya. So obviously, in the Braisa, the only thing he did was he sold it. So it must be Rab Shimon. And what's the problem? My love Rab Shimoni, and because we're being pedantic here and we're being medayik, that the Braisa says dafka if you sold it, not if you shechted it. Okay, and then it says here is mishalim tashlume above chamisha. My love Rab Shimoni, the author of Shimon, Almo, and yet he says you're chai for selling it. You cannot shecht it, you're chai for selling. Clearly not like Rish Lakish. Alma, I got the lesson of it. Even though you cannot shecht it, but you're still chai for selling it. So it's a right, Rabbi Yechon, that it's option, either sell or shecht. You don't have to be able to do both. Amalei Rish Lakish answers back, who told you the author of the Braisa of Shimon? Maybe the Braisa is not being particular, and it could be the Rabban. Why does the Braisa only say if you sold a treifa? Why does the Braisa say if you sold or shechted a treifa? Why do you have to talk about selling? Isn't that a proof that it's Rab Shimon? Because shechting you wouldn't be chayiv. The Elamai Rish Lakish answers back. So what do you want to tell me, the author of the Braisa of Shimon, right? And you're being so particular because he said dafka if you sold it, because shechita you won't be chayiv. So that's the question. Klayim, what was the first case in the Braisa? The first case of the Braisa was if you by climb. And what is the example of climb? Shechting. That if you shechted the climb, a sheep that came from a crossbreed, then the din is that you're not chayiv. What about if you sold it? You'll be potter. What's the difference selling as a shechting? Won't make a difference. And how can the Braisa only mention shechting? You're being so particular in the wording of the Braisa that the Braisa is one example that means excluding the other one. So by climb, when the Braisa says with tovcha you shechted it, which means not if you sold it, why should be a difference? Climb betwicha isa b'mechila lesser. What if you sold climb, you wouldn't be chai. What's the difference? Elanova, but Bryce is not being particular. It gives you one example, but it doesn't make sense. Whatever he did, you chayv. No, aim rabbanami. So why can't the Bryce be the rabbanon? And when it came to a treifa, the Bryce gives an example of selling it, but it could be just as well be shchita. Tana mechira, what did it? Rabbi Yechon says no. Why do I have a proof in the Braisa? There's a big difference between in the case of Klein, why the Braisa doesn't mention shechting, what do you call it, selling. It only talks about shechting, and why and this is the fact that when it comes to treifa, it only talks about selling because you cannot shecht. Why? What's it like this? Hi, my, what are you talking about? If you tell me the author of the Braisa of Shimon, I did a Tony treifa bechada, Tony Klein bechada. He gives you one example of each, not being particular. Doesn't have to tell you both because the Torah already says tvachim achari. So it gives you one example by treifa, which is let's say shechting, and since by Klein it gives you an example of by Klein gives an example of shechting, so by treifa gives an example of selling. Hello, amid. If you're going to tell me, but really you can do either one. Amid. If you're going to tell me. Rabbanon. So that's Liam. You can tell me. Sorry. If you learn, so Rabbi Yechel gets, if you learn the Bryce's authors of Shimon, and when it comes to treifa, there's only one option that you can be liable for, and that is what? If you sell it, because if you shechted, you wouldn't be chayiv. It's not shchita, nobody gets spends from it. So because by treifa, it had to only give you one example. You had no choice. So when it came to climb, even though you have two choices, you can either sell or shechted. It also gives you one example to flow better. That's if you learn this Rab Shimon. And when it comes to treifa, you only limit it to one example. But if you're going to tell me the author of the Bryce Rabbanon, which means it doesn't matter. You can do shchita and mechira here. You can do shchita and mechira here. Then navinu v'nastina. Why doesn't the Bryce just collect the two together and say like this? Gonav, because both options are available. So because Rabban hold that we don't care if it turns out to be treif. Gonav climb, if you stole climb, or treif, you stole treifa, or and then tavchan, either you proceeded to shechted or mochin sold the mishal. So it's a kasha nishlakish. Because it's clear the author of this brayso must be Rab Shimon, and the author of the brayso must be Rab Shimon because he says Rab Shimon says that that's why the brayso dafka picks treifa. That's why the brayso dafka picks treifa by mechira by treifa because you have no choice, and therefore proves. But yet you're chayiv if you sell it. Is that the two are not linked together? If you cannot do option B. Yeah, so exactly. So that means that if you cannot check, you're still chayiv if you sell. That's kasha. We don't have an answer for that. Says the Gemara, Klayim. Why is Klayim no good? Sexy. My Rabbi. It says in Pasuk, right? If it says in Pasuk, you stole a shirt or a set. Rabbi said, why does he set a sheep? Zebana of. From here we learn a binyanav. Kol mokum. Kol mokum shenema seh. Whenever it says the word seh, the Torah has been very particular, only if it's a seh that came from both a set of a male and a female seh. But if it came from a female seh, let's say, and a male goat, it does not have the din of a seh. And the same thing over here. That's why climb. So that's a question. How can we then say we just said in the Braisa that if you stole a seh of climb, you're chayiv for shachting it or selling it? But Rava says that whenever it says seh, means dafka seh that comes from proper, a male and a female seh, and yet Klein does not. How can that work? So we answer shiny hach. Rava was not talking about this case. You know why? I could hear a special pasuk. I'm going to send pasuk. Oi, it says in the pasuk, if a person steals a shoyd or a seh, what's the oi? Oi is to tell you, or another one, or what? A normal. So let's expand the seh. Not just a strict seh, but even a seh that comes from a mixed, a crossbreed, a hybrid. El Rabbis a klein. Says the Gemara. So what do you tell me? The whole oil Rabbis. So you tell me what? If it says seh on its own, it means exclusively a seh, not a hybrid. But if it says oi, it comes to include. Let me show you another oi where in fact we say it comes to exclude. But Tanya, we learn it says in pasuk. It says in pasuk if you had a shoyd, or if you have an ox or a kesev. So you have a shoyd or an ox or sheep or a goat, kiyivolid, and when it's born, you have to wait 7 days, and on the 8th day, you go ahead, you can bring it as a carbon. It says shoyd, oi kesef, oi eis, all these ois. So with Ashen, shoyd, oi kesef, it says oi kesef prat leklayim. A shoyd or a kesef, if a kesef comes from a hybrid, if a kesef is a hybrid, you can bring it as a carbon. Why say oi? To tell you to exclude a climb. Oi A's, and what is oi A's? Another oi. Prat lenidma. Nidma means that both the parents are, let's say, a sheep, but the offspring looks different. Nidma, it looks different. So it's not a hybrid at all, but it just doesn't look like it. Not the father, not the mother, not neither of them. So then you cannot bring as a carbon. Pasnish, you don't bring as a carbon. So what do we see from here about the oi comes to exclude? You said before that in our case it says sand. Robert says it means not a hybrid, but in our case because it says oi said. Therefore we say if you steal a you chayiv dal the hay because oi comes to include. Here we see it says oi and that can come to exclude. That you cannot bring a carbon for climb. Says Gemara, Omar Rabba, there's no rules. You have to look at the context. All about context. The it says shoyd oisa. By Gneva it says shoyd oisa. right? So the iati yochel lahoitzi climb name. Now, the pasuk says Shoyde said you cannot combine a Shoyde and say they should mate together. It's impossible. The gestation period for Shoyde is 9 months, for Kesef is 5 months. They cannot together crossbreed. You can't crossbreed the two animals. So therefore, if you cannot make a climb, why did then try to say oi to include climb? That says let's focus on each one alone. That say alone. If it is its climb from a mother say and the father was a goat, it's climb, which is possible to be your chayiv dalad v'hei, because we already know you can't have climb. So what does oikam must become to contradict that, and that is to include is oil rabbis climb. Gabag kochim. What is it about kochim? The beginning of the passage is about kochim. Shoy the kesev. You're right, cannot combine. But then it says kesev ayes. Kesev ayes can combine. They can be crossbred, and you can produce a sheep. So therefore, so the Torah already saying climb, and then it says oy must be to exclude. The chsiv kesev eish at yochel haiti climb name. We could physically create climb out of them. So oy must be lemayit who comes to the limit. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. You focusing on the second part of the pasuk where it says kesev eish. But what's the first part of the pasuk? Shoyda kesev, and the shoyda kesev, like you said before, cannot become climb. And there it says oy. So according to your logic, shoyda kesev is climb. If you look at the ratio of the pasuk, shoyda kesev is climb, and then oy comes to exclude climb, not to what do you call it? Sorry, shoyda kesev cannot be climb because you can never make the two together. So if it says oy must be to include, so the carbon should be able to be from climb, following your logic. Well, it says shoyda kesev she'einat yochel to climb, and they can't make climb for them. The near base. So let's say you could have a carbon that comes to climb. So Gemara says no. We look at the sefer. The sefer says kesev oyes. Kesev oyes naturally could be crossbred, and you can produce climb a kesev and oyes. A sheep and a goat can produce another sheep. So therefore, the oy over there comes to exclude. Since the oy in the second half of the pasuk comes to exclude, the oy in the first half of the exclude. One is for nidma, and one is for nidma means that it's really bell parents. It's not crossbred, but it looks different. That both of them are excluded. So therefore, the sefer ma'idation now might. So let's say the other way around. Who told you to focus on the sefer and say since the oy comes to exclude, work our way backwards? Let's look at the ratio. The ratio says shoyed oy kesef, and a shoyed oy kesef cannot ever be climb. You can't put the two together. Can't crossbreed the two. So oy over there must be to include. So let's say that both oys are coming to include something, to include a climb, to include a nidma, not to exclude. L'rabbis, sefer nam l'rabbis. Where's Haima? What are you talking about? If it comes to exclude, I understand why there are two oyes. One is, and what's got two chedushim. One is to exclude kalayim, and one is to exclude nidma. Even though you said, look, crossbred is no good. Crossbred is no good. Nevertheless, nidma. I also have to exclude nidma. Because nidma, you would have thought, look, both parents are sheep. Because everything culture exactly like we can have a whole sugi in the Gemara and not here. But in a whole other place, if you have a tummy that comes out of a tohid. Tohid, they get parents and it creates an animal that's a tummy. So therefore, it's possible to have a nidma, tell you that you cannot, but you cannot bring it to garden. If you're telling me that it comes to be marba, once you know that you can be marba climb, because you're telling me what? That kesev and shoy cannot ever combine together. So what would the first oy come to include? If it says kesev, I said oy shoy, oy kesev, talking about the carbon. What would, and it says oy. So what would you look at? A shoy and a kesev can never be joined together, can never be crossbred. So what does the oy come to tell you? That if you have a seh, crossbred, it's all right. So once you know that klayim is all right, you need another pasuk to tell you that nidm is all right. Mother klayim with one of the parents is a different animal, and yet it's all right to bring it on the mizbeach. You need to tell me that that a nidme with both parents are kosher. What I need two eyes for? So now we have a problem. So we have two psukim where it says seh, and each one we use the oy to either include or exclude. So what's Rava coming along with his din? Every time it says seh, it means not climb. Where's every time? Every time it says seh, ain't a climb to exclude climb. What do you need it for? What are you talking about? If we're talking about kochim, it says clearly shoyed oy kesev. We just said the oy comes to exclude pratla climbs. I don't need this binyan of rubber. Kol makur shenema seh. Every time it says the word sheep in the Torah, it means to exclude climb, a hybrid. You just told me that Oy does the same thing by Korban. So I don't need Rava's law. And E, so where's it coming? And it can't be talking about Geneva because we just said Geneva is different. It comes to include. If you stole a shoyd or a seb, which naturally cannot be climbed. So what does it come to include? That if you stole a seb that's climbed, you have to pay 4 or 5 times. So where is it Rava's din apply? Elam Maise, maybe it's talking about Maise behemoth. Every 10th animal you have to, you go through your portal, then every 10th animal you strike, then you have to give it, you have to make the base of your slime and so on and so forth. So now, even though it does not say there the word seh at all, it says soin, kol masa bokav soin, kol shiyavatach l'shabbat. And then it says, Asili Yikayz Hashem. Okay, it doesn't say the word seh, but it says soin. Soin is sheep also. And the Rabbi therefore is coming along and saying that since it said soin, it means only not klayim, not klayim. We know that we have a gzerah. It says and over here by the pasuk of a korban it says tachas. He 7 days it should be with his mother. We learn out a number of dinim, the ma'ase behema from korbanos and vice versa. So therefore we'll also learn out over there as well that you cannot use climb. I don't need Rava's din that whatever it says befrat, which more than say Rava said seh, and here it says soy. But anyway, it's so maybe Rav is talking about a that we say the firstborn sheep, there's a he wants to tell you that no, that but not from climb, not if the say is climb. It says in the pasuk "Va'avarta kol peterechel Hashem," and then it says by Ma'ase kol yavatach l'shavet. So you already have a gzerah shavet anyway. Whatever dinim apply to Ma'ase behema apply to b'choy seh. So I don't need Rav's din. Even without Rav's din, I would know that climb. There's no din of b'choy. Inami nidme amre loy. And if you want to say for nidme, also I don't need the chsiv. It says ach b'choyer shoy. It says another. I don't need. If you tell me, okay, no need say not to tell you to exclude climb, but exclude nidme, where it has proper parents, but it doesn't look the same. Even for that, I don't need it. You know why? Because already it says ach b'choyer shoy. The person b'choyer of a shoy. Yeah, achi hu shoy u b'choyer shoy has to look exactly identical to the mother. So to the cow. So where's Rava's din? No, this is by B'choy, but the Rava comes along and makes this statement. You should know a universal statement. Whenever it says in the Torah, seh, it means not climb. So we're trying to work out, so where exactly is this state applicable? Without the Rava's din, we don't know all these things by B'choy, we don't know by Ma'ase behema, we don't know by a korban, and taka by stealing dal hay is different. So where's the Rava's din? And madach, what do we learn from the pasuk shoy b'choy? We learn b'choy shoy. We learn from that has to look like the mother. So surely climb is no good because climb is mamish. It's not just the mother. There's another party involved, another breed. Climb it boy. Ela ki eat with Rava. You know where Rava's din is applicable? Lenient petachamor. If you want to exchange the third one chamor, now we learned ain't poidin. Okay, you paid a chamor with a seh. He said you should not be paid a petachamor. Loi. And there it says the word seh. How do you redeem a chamor with a seh? And Rava comes along and tell you, but not from klayim. And how do you know? Because it says seh, and seh means exclusively seh. Ain't poison loy bagel, not with a calf, v'loy b'chayin, not with a wild animal, v'loy b'shchuta, not the animals geschochten, v'loy b'treife, v'loy b'klayim, not climb. How do you know not climb? And that's what Rava says. You know how you know you cannot be poison with climb? Because it says seh. And v'loy koi, not this animal that's called koi, which is a big machlek of what koi is. If it's a mixture of a sheep and a goat, or if it's a mixture of a domestic animal and non-domestic animal, different opinions. Okay, that's the whole Rava. Very interesting. Rava uses the word zebon of kol mokum and sachaka. We found one place. And that's kol mokum.